Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Ask me almost anything. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am Writing for Screens. I created this channel and to try and teach some things that I learned in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of this business, I decided I wanted to try and leave behind some of the things I had to figure out for myself, things I had to teach myself, so that you don't have to. You can take these things, they're tools, skills, insights, things to try, just so that you can see if they fit your way of writing, your goals, your type of writing. I'm not going to tell you there's a system. There isn't. There is no right way to do this. So all I can try and do is pass on some tips, techniques, tricks that I learned, hoping that they will help you write your own script. Everybody has to figure out their own way of writing, their own thing they want to write. There's no right or wrong. So what I've done in order to teach this is I've broken down it into topics. Each topic I try and do a lesson on. These lessons, here's a little, sorry about that. I've got a change of camera issue. Everything that I wanted to teach has been broken down to these little lessons. This is a little screen grab of my channel. Here's a closer view so that you can see. The top 3 playlists have these lessons, these little 10-minute videos on a topic. For instance, genre, flashbacks, character, dialogue, whatever it is that I think there's 10 minutes worth of material that I can teach you, I put it into a video. That is where everything begins. If you are here, if you are trying to learn something, check out these playlists. You can just scan through. The thumbnails tell you what they're about, so that you can give us a sense, that I can give you a sense of what there is to try and use. Oh, you see, I got a loose wire here. I got a loose connection. So I'm just going to keep this thing over my face while I try and fix it. All right. So, I can't do that. All right. So that's the thing. I do these live streams. I try and do them once a week. Every Wednesday at 1 p.m. That's when I sit here for an hour, try to talk about some topics that came up in other live streams, or when people send me messages, answer some questions, talk about a topic that's on my mind. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I am here for this. But the real stuff that matters, sorry, going to try my other camera again, try and get that working. How are we doing? Are we coming up? Is it working? Yes! Hello. All right, let me say some hellos. Hello, Nathan. Hello, Nacho. Good to see you. Sonia. Hello, Donna. And Doreen. And Jean, fresh from Ward 6. T. Trent. And Larry. Okay, at work, so I'm looking. Yes, that is absolutely fine. Oh, yes, once again, I meant to change the color of these so that they read a little better. Hi, Helene. Good to see you. Hello, Ricky. Hi, everybody. Okay, let's talk about today's topics. I got 3 quick topics to get into, questions that were asked either in other live streams or by email. Let me just run through those, and then we will go wild with whatever you guys want to ask me. But the first question is from Michael T. About a week or 2 ago, he asked, and I was in the middle of other things and I couldn't get to this, how do you handle the dreaded Act 2? His original question was simply, hi, Michael. Can you discuss the dreaded Act 2? So here's what I have to think about Act 2, because this is not the first time someone has asked me about this. A lot of people ask me about Act 2. And my first thought about this when I got this question was, why are you dreading it? What's to dread? I didn't quite understand. And some people say they feel like they're just sort of spinning their wheels, or that they don't know. Like, I don't even entirely know what's wrong with Act 2, because it seems to me like the same problems in Act 1 and Act 3 are in Act 2. Like, it's the same issues. But but a lot of people say that they can think of a great beginning and think of a great ending, but they can't think of what goes in between. my answer is stop thinking about it as Act 2. That's the first. It's just really, really like start thinking about it as the story. And the story already is underway. So you're actually in good shape. You've already figured out who it's about. You know that whatever that is that they whoever they are, they want something, or they're trying to get something, or they have some problem. You got us hooked because you've got, in the beginning of a story, you're going to give us the person or people involved, and you're going to present the situation in which they are that we are interested, in which they have some kind of thing they're trying to do. And then they start to do things. That's Act 1. That is what happens in Act 1, as if there wasn't, in the beginning of a story. I'm getting a little iffy on this Act 1, Act 2 thing because people seem to get hung up on it. There is no Act 1. There's no curtain that comes down. Okay, it's just the beginning of the story in which you meet the main characters and you understand their situation, their problem, their desire, and then they start to do things because that desire is hard to get. That's the beginning of a story. Act 2 is when they start doing those things and they don't work. Because if they worked, your story would be over, right? That's it. Suppose somebody said, like, I want to rob a bank. And at the end of Act 1, at the end of the beginning of the story, they rob the bank. Now it's done, okay? So the point about this is whatever happens at the beginning of the story when they start to do things is that those things are either harder than they thought, or sometimes those things go terribly wrong and make things worse, or they have to figure out what it is to do. So the first thing they have to do is attack the problem by figuring out what to do. That's the first thing they have to do. Whatever it is, that's your story. That's your Act 2. They start to do things. So then that thing doesn't work. Well, what does that do? First of all, it often makes another problem, or it sets them up with something that they have to do to get past why they can't get what they want. And then you're in the story, and that's what Act 2 is just they're trying to do things, and they may run into dramatic encounters with other people who have other goals, or they have steps they have to take. Whatever it is, that's your story. Don't think of it as Act 2. Act 2 is weird. Okay? Story is, I got these people, they're trying to get to the end, and there's all this stuff in the way. That's Act 2. So genuinely, Act 2 is just everything after they started, before it ends. That's Act 2. And the answer to, and please tell me if there's a specific thing you're dreading about it, but my main question is just why think about it as this separate thing? I don't even understand what that is. So help me there. Help me. Hi, Random Vlogs. Yes, can't wait. Yes, I have faith. The contract will. Yes, I'm glad about the WGA agreement. Obviously, we all are, and now we are got our fingers crossed for SAG. But I have a Screen Actors Guild. I have faith that will work out. I believe in it. Thank you, Random Vlogs. Hi, Pedro. Glad you're lurking. Good to see you. And hello, this is Kitschy. Okay, that is great. I'm very glad. I know you meant lot, so it's okay. All right. So, Lan, in this Act 1, Act 2 thing, do you have a good metric to measure if the stakes or dilemma is strong enough to drive a story? I actually did a whole video on this topic. Let's see if I've put that in here. Do I have it in here? Stakes? Yes, I do. Okay, it's called Stakes. So I'm going to suggest, my first thing is you can do it now if you want, but I would suggest when I'm done, I will put a link down at the bottom. At the end of this episode, when I have a minute, I will go to the description on YouTube. There's a little description paragraph under my picture, and it will have a link. But just go to Stakes and find out. My basic answer is what makes it strong enough. The question is, how do you know the stakes are strong enough? The stakes are strong enough if they matter to the person in the story. That's where stakes are. You can have, the stakes are not strong enough because nobody's going to die. Well, that's silly. A lot of stories are not about whether or not someone's going to die or whether the fate of the nation hangs on it. What matters is it important to the person? Often, The thing that matters is simply, will this other person like me? That's the stakes of a lot of good stories is, do they like me? And then everything you have to do to get them to like each other. So the answer is, stakes are simply what's important to the characters in this story, what's important to them in what they're trying to do in the story. Hello, Kirby. Do you believe in breaking Act 2 into 2 parts? I don't believe in, I believe in it in the sense that I believe people can do it. I don't believe it is required. I believe, I have a friend who often does it, but the answer is every story will have its own shape, its own feel. You'll decide based on what your events are. Maybe it will fall into 2 parts. Maybe it'll fall into 3. Who knows? Maybe it'll fall into 7. It doesn't matter. There is no optimal shape or number of scenes or anything else. There is what's optimal for your version of your story. And that choice, making those choices, saying, I really think this should be in 5 sequences, or I really think this should be in 50 sequences, little tiny things where they're doing that. Those are your style. Those are your voice. Those are your plan. Yes, it will definitely be a problem if you have every scene, if you have 50 scenes in 20 minutes, yeah, probably going to throw people off in the studios. But on the other hand, some indie people could be like, that's genius, do that. So my answer is, I don't believe in any particular enumeration or plan for structure of a story, except beginning, middle, and end. I do believe almost every story. I cannot think of a story that does not have a beginning, middle, and end. Other than, and that's not acts. That's just stories have beginning, middle, and end. So that's my feeling about that. Hi, Next Institute. Hi, Maratolatoso. Hi, and hi, Junaid. Very nice to meet you. Thank you. Okay. My understanding was that the middle sags and is hard to fill adequately to get to the ending you want. This is a good point. It sags if you're not giving them stuff to do, if you're not giving them problems. The point about anything like this is it sags if when you start the story, they don't have trouble doing what they're doing. They don't have obstacles. That's really what would make the second act slow down or sag or be boring. You haven't given them problems enough. It's not hard enough. That's not the same as stakes. That's just obstacles. That is challenges. That is reasons why they can't get what they want right away. Now, I do want to point out that in the one of my first and biggest hits, this video, the 6 essential questions, I talk a lot about this concept of the middle of the story is when people are doing things and those things are not accomplishing the goal. That's the main, any story, that is the main portion of any story. I believe if you look at most stories, you're going to see that most of the time what people are doing is encountering something which is making it impossible for them to get what they want. That thing could be their own fear. That thing could be that they have a bad habit of lying every time they write. It could be whatever it is, there's something there. Or it could be, like in 1917, that there's a war going on. And they've got all these things, that warlike things, that keep them from getting to where they can give their message. Any story has a series of obstacles. In theory, these obstacles are caused. They're not just here's one, here's a new one, here's another one. That doing one leads to another. Doing one causes another. That tends to make the acts work better. Otherwise, it gets what they call episodic. On the other hand, a good story can be episodic. You just want to make sure the episodes are good. Okay. You're welcome, Lan Friedman. So that is my personal take on Act 2. The main thing about Act 2 is where things are not working, where things are going wrong, where people are making efforts, but they are not going well. Like in Saving Private Ryan, another one. The war movies are really good for this. They get a mission. We meet them and they get a mission. Actually, we meet him and then he gets a mission and he gets these other guys. Then they have like, I don't know, 6 or 7 big episodes in which they face challenges. They're trying to get to this town. On the way, they have to save this person or fight that person or get through this. Each one is like, if we don't get through this, we can't get to the thing we want to do. Okay. So let's see. Hello, Sopol. Are you familiar with Dan? Yes. I am familiar very vaguely. My take on this, my take on all theories of writing is always the same. There is a lot of good to be found in anybody's structural plan. Dan Harmon says the circle. I don't personally get that much out of the circle. However, if it helps you, yes. The whole point of any of these structures, they are an artificial way of understanding things so that you can fill in your things according to your instincts. So if this story circle or 17 steps to a story or whatever it is, if that helps you understand your own story, it's great. If it doesn't, it's not, and you can throw it away. It's not like these things are actually, they don't exist. The story circle doesn't actually exist. There's no actual, like you can't, people spend a lot of time trying to cram stories into their formula. And they say, oh, this is the point where this happens. The person who wrote it may not have known about the story circle. Okay, the story circle is fairly recent, and the people who wrote Chinatown or Casablanca or Love Actually, they didn't have the story circle. They just were telling a story the way they thought it was cool. And then you can, now sometimes they'll say, I think I need a big problem every 10 minutes, or I think I need to divide the middle in half to 2 sections. Whatever they felt helped them structure it in their head. That's the structure they worked with. You may never see that, and you may apply your own interpretation to it. You may say, this is the part 6 of the circle or something. That's your interpretation of the existing object. But it's not like there's an actual rule. There's simply, these are things to try. And as such, story circle, great, definitely. See if it works. If it helps you, if you go, oh yeah, I can see my character has to have a problem here, great. If that problem is not fitting where you think the story should go, then it's not great. 100% sure, 40% of the time. Hi, I like that percentage. Hey, Ade, very nice to see you. Helene, I am writing a novel series right now. Wow, admirable. I know the story of book 1. I know the endings, but I don't know everything yet. Do you think it's wise to start writing, or should I go back to the question 6? First of all, don't worry about the videos. Don't do whatever you want. If you know, you're saying you know the story of book 1, write book 1. Why not? Especially because these books apparently are self-contained, right? Each one is a novel into itself. In theory, you could read it by itself. If you have an idea of things that are going to happen in book 6, and those things have to be planted in book 1, just be sure you plant them. You might write book 1 and then stop and outline the rest, or at least figure out those things that have to be planted in various steps of the story. That's the only thing you really have to do. Do I think you should start writing? You should start writing when you can look through the plan for the story, outline, whatever it is that you've got, and you can say, yeah, I think I know what that is, and I think everything else I have to figure out as I write it. That's when you start writing. And remember, writing, planning, right? Sometimes you write a while and you go, oh, I don't know what to do here. You stop and you figure that out, and then you go back to writing. That's all okay. The real story starts when people take action, but the story in theory starts on page 1. I mean, if you're doing it right, you should be hooking people in on the very first page. Yeah, if a midpoint is used, like I said, like for the book I'm writing now. Well, first of all, remember, Hollywood-style commercial feature films have 3 acts, and the 3-act proportions are roughly 1/4, 1/2, 1/4. In other words, the first act is about 1/4 of the script. The middle section is about half the script. The last section is about 1/4. So if it's a 120-page script, which is long nowadays, you got your 30, 60, 30. In reality, it's probably 20, 50, 20. You see. Okay. George Saunders says causality creates the appearance of meaning, and that has really helped me not just have be. Yes, exactly. Cause and effect. That's another way to say it. Causality. In other words, the idea that things are making, like things, once you do something and you have a character do something, it makes something else happen or fail to happen. That failing is a thing happening. So yes, absolutely. George Saunders almost always right about everything. The next question: what is the basic length for paragraphs in a script? Google user, and then there was a number. I don't like to give away last names, which for a Google user would be a number. I'm seeing a lot of questions on forums about screenplay paragraph length and how it affects pacing. Many strong opinions, like no paragraphs over 3 lines or 4 lines or 5 lines, might be worth a discussion. Yes, I agree. It is worth it. So I am going to show you guys a bunch of it, a bunch of samples. But my main message here before we start looking at samples is, yes, in screenplays, it is generally advisable in the 21st century to keep your paragraphs quite short. Break them up with a lot of paragraph breaks if you have a lot of information. It does help the pace. People in the 21st century are very loath to read a large paragraph. The point about scripts is that they are not there to absorb you in the writing. Now, the tricky thing is very often people in writing scripts are describing physical action and physical locations and physical people. And so therefore there's no dialogue. So therefore you want text. But that text can be broken up, and I would advise you to do it. Now, some people will say old scripts written back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, they have these giant blocks of text, giant paragraphs. That is true. It was a different century. And those ways of writing are generally not loved. The reason they are not loved is that the people who have to read these scripts have to read them very fast. They have to read a lot of scripts. The average person in the business has to read dozens of scripts a day, okay? And they need that to move really fast. So the faster your writing moves, which means generally short sentences and relatively frequent paragraph breaks, helps it move faster. Don't know why, just does. The other reason that, frankly, you shouldn't bog down in big paragraphs is movies move. They move fast. They never stop. Once a story on a screen starts unspooling, it never stops. It goes and goes and goes. Even if there's commercials, it will go and go and go. And that's kind of what you want the experience of reading to be like. There may be little breaths, but overall, check how long the transitional downbeats are. They're very short. So let's look at some scripts so that we can talk about this. Now, I've just chosen a bunch of random scripts by people I consider truly great filmmakers or screenwriters. And therefore, let's see. So, for instance, Steve Zaillian. Okay. Wrote The Irishman. Okay, now, people can debate whether or not it's a good movie. I think it's great, but it is trying. It is very difficult because it is a story about the banality of evil. It is about the boring, stupid shallowness of people who commit horrible, horrible crimes. But let's look at this. Now, this is... so, we have a Now, this is written in collaboration with the director so that they knew what visuals there were going to be. But moving along a hallway of an assisted living facility, past doors, some open, some closed, as if looking for somebody. Maybe not for benign reasons. And it's just, this is like a mood, okay? I'm not even sure you need some open, some closed, but I guess so. The main thing is, look at how short these paragraphs are. We glimpse some of the elderly men and women in the rooms, but like everyone else in their lives, disregard them and keep looking for someone else. In other words, we're just getting a vibe here. But these paragraphs are short. This is who we're looking. No one comes. We come close enough to see his gold watch encircled with diamonds and the distinctive ring made from a gold coin on a finger. Okay? And then we cut, and we're in a new place. These paragraphs, look at all of them. None of them are more than, 5 or 6 lines, tops. Okay? So, that's... they're describing actually a fair amount of information, but none of these paragraphs are very long. Now, let's contrast that with a script written back in the 1970s. Let me get rid of the Irishman. Now, this is something that, frankly, I think you probably should not do, which is Mr. Lucas writes enormous blocks of text. I cannot guarantee that this is it seems like a direct a copy of the script. This is clearly not the original script. The original script was written on a typewriter, and this is clearly a digital transcription of that script. But the language does look like original scripty. I do think that this is right. So we're talking about just big, hold on. So there's just a lot to read here. And people in the movie business, they just don't want to read this much. Especially, this is an action scene. Now, admittedly, this was a different time. Also, George Lucas had this whole thing in his head. He had the storyboards in his mind of what it was going to actually look like, and he's describing that. However, that's a lot of words. And the people in the business nowadays, they don't like so many words. So let's look at another Academy Award winner, Nomadland. Okay, written by Chloe Zhao. This is really a director's film, but she wrote it herself. So yeah, we've still got, even here, we've got a physical, there's a title sequence with no dialogue, but still, she broke up the paragraphs. These are different short sentences with very brief imagery. And then, now, in theory, we got the factory, the workers, the white piles of gypsum, families playing at the pool. She could have made this one paragraph. Okay, it's all one thing. It's a list of items in a montage. But by breaking it up, she lets our mind kind of relax from the terror of facing a big paragraph. People in the industry do not want big paragraphs. So by simply taking this information and breaking it into separate actions to say, so we start with a description of the place. Then she's doing some stuff, and then she's doing some other stuff. And so she breaks it into separate paragraphs. It helps us to read it. Okay? This is a very visual film, but these descriptions are broken up into smaller steps. One of the things that I want to talk about that is that when you are doing a paragraph break, try to remember that you are leading the reader's mind to say, this is a separate thing from this action, this step, going through the door, sitting at the table, those are two separate things, two separate ways of acting. And so therefore you can break them into separate paragraphs. And especially if you want to show something like person A is over here, person B is over here. By writing those in separate paragraphs, you put mental space between them. You separate their actions, you separate the focus. So therefore, Let's take a look at another great script. Okay, this is an interesting one because this is one, once again, written by the director with some writers and writing a great deal of physical description and narration, like the description of people's ideas and characters for a movie called The Place Beyond the Pines, which is a really cool movie. Not many people know about it, but even here, this set of physical description, which is of an ornate sequence, which is actually, I believe, shot without many cuts, but still broken into 3 paragraphs. And this is done by the idea that this paragraph is about the main character, Luke. These are about, there's a separation of action and a certain separation of a new thing has happened. The other drivers leave the cage. Luke is driving in the cage for the finale. So even here, where you've got fairly dense writing, still not these giant paragraphs. They break it up into 3 or 4 lines, 1 or 2 lines. See what I'm saying? And this is a very, very described story. A lot of description, a lot of narration is happening here, and yet broken up. So that is my lesson about paragraphs. The answer is yes. Break your paragraphs short. Do not include large blocks of type unless you are trying to sort of be aggressive with the reader in saying, I'm so important, I want to give you a hard time reading it. Because the people who read scripts are not ordinary readers. They are reading under pressure. They are reading for something to translate to another medium, and they are reading a lot. So you just want to make it easy on them. That's a fair thing to do. So Jean says, my mind wanders at the beginning of a film or a book. For that reason, I like to get a few minutes to settle in before I have relevant information presented to me. This is tricky because there are people who believe in taking some time before you get relevant information. I personally don't like that because I feel like, what's the story about? But I do understand what you're saying. I think that I think the answer to Jean's problem is small bits right away. In other words, meeting a character, learning about the world, something to engage you. You don't have to pile on everything you need to know in the first minute, but you do need to give us something to hook into. My issue for Larry is punctuation. Figure out where to put the punctuation. The general rule is at the end. If you have punctuation, and the punctuation in theory is stopping, is interrupting, stopping, whatever it is, you're separating. You're using punctuation to enclose sections of words. So I hope that helps. Okay, let's talk about the third question, which is from Anshul. I believe it was last week. Anshul P said, I like unhappy endings. Please tell me tricks for that. Which is cool. Cool question. Interesting question. Because my first thought was endings are endings. They're all the same. But no, there is an interesting problem with an unhappy ending. I would say the first thing you want to do to make an ending unhappy is in order to have the impact of hurting, of disappointing, of causing pain in your audience because you're giving them an unhappy ending, is they have to care. They have to care about the character. Now, what you want ideally is for the audience to feel good about unhappiness. That's an interesting problem. But they're not going to feel anything if they do not care about this character. Now, very rarely, an unhappy ending is a punishment for a character we loathe, but that generally is not the main character. You don't usually tell a story about a main character who you just want the audience to hate. It happens, but almost always there's another layer of sympathy or empathy or understanding or something for your central character. So the question is, how are you going to let the audience know that this unhappiness you are giving them is good? That's the key. You have to think about, why is this unhappy ending? Why am I doing it? For instance, is it a lesson? Are you trying to say, if you make the mistakes or choices that this character makes, there is going to be a consequence for it, and that will be unhappy? That's a legitimate thing to do. The price is paid. Now, very often that may be worth it. For instance, I may have an affair and it may end unhappily, but it was worth the lessons learned during the course of it. Or I may do something which means I am going to die in the process of this mission, but I am doing that in such a way that I sacrifice myself for someone else. It's an unhappy ending, but the sacrifice makes it okay. Sometimes, like in a good tragedy, like Romeo and Juliet, these people whose impulsive love broke boundaries are punished in one sense, but they also have inspired us in their love and their questioning of these boundaries. So, there is a lesson in Romeo and Juliet for the other characters. By the end of the story, I think the warring families are going, oh my God, look what our war has done. It has caused the death of two of our prized children. So there's a lot of ways, but the question is, how is your unhappy ending a good thing? And you really need to think about that when you are writing an unhappy ending. If you're just writing an ending that's just like a slap in the face to the audience because it's just bad, now and then that's a kind of punk move. And there are some movies like that, especially in the 1970s. There was a lot of like, our character is trying to get somewhere and they're just not going to make it. But that's not overwhelmingly a good experience. Now and then it can work. Horror movies also tend to do that. Now, it's interesting. Horror movies go through phases, and there has been a phase lately of, you think you've beaten the monster, but then the very last thing in the movie is like, oh, it's back. Yeah, it's okay. You have to think in your own mind what you are saying with your unhappy ending, and be sure that the events and the ways that the characters portray themselves or understand themselves lead us to some form of satisfaction in unhappiness. And that is quite possible. In theory, Rocky, spoilers on Rocky coming up, Rocky in theory is an unhappy ending, right? I mean, spoiler alert, Rocky does not win his big fight, but he has set the goal early on of saying, I'm not good enough to beat this guy yet. However, if I can simply stay on my feet through the fight, I will feel great triumph. So that's a happy ending within an unhappy ending. See what I mean there? Well, then just practice breaking them down. Larry is talking about punctuation. And the answer is, it's all one thought in your brain. Write it down as all one thought, but then look at it and start to notice that there are actually sub-thoughts within it, because there always will be. There is no such thing as one giant, uninterrupted, unified thought that I know of. Except, I guess, like philosophically. But in most writing, there will be subsections where, for one thing, the classic grammar question, like, who is the subject of the sentence? Like, there's going to be a section of your thought which is about one person or one action, and then there will be another one. If you're doing the flow of things, break those up. Give each one its own, this person is doing or is being this thing. What do you think about fragment sentences to shorten paragraph length? I'm a fan. Yes, I believe that fragments. We just saw some in the samples that I had. They're great. You get a real fast pace. You don't want to, with any trick, with any gimmick, with any effect, you don't want to keep hitting it so often that it becomes numbing. If every single sentence is a fragment, then it will become boring. If every single sentence is long, it will become boring. The one you just want to keep changing it up. You want to keep giving some diversity to the experience of reading the script. This is Kitschy. He says, Larry, there's a few really simple, really elegant punctuation books out there that will solve your problems with one or two readings. I'll try to remember the titles and get back to you. Yeah, I would say that the main thing is look at the contents. The contents break apart in any long paragraph. Now, sometimes you'll get somebody like William Faulkner who likes a super long sentence in order to approximate the stream of consciousness or the idea of connection between thoughts. However, that is a literary device which is not meant for screenplays. It's meant for reading text, for reading the book in which your mind is engaging with his mind. If you are reading a script by William Faulkner, he should keep his sentences shorter. Okay. Donna says, I know you're not asking me, Larry, but I would suggest doing your best getting it all down on paper and get someone else to do the punctuation or do it yourself later. Yes, exactly. I agree with that, although I would say try not to get someone else. Try and practice for yourself, just looking and saying, where is there an action? Where is there an idea? And how is, like, if I'm ending that with and then you keep going to another idea, break that into two. Put a little period there and then start the other one because they're separate. They're separate thoughts. The whole point about writing is that you're actually expressing thoughts and you want to keep them clear. You want to say this thought, then this thought. Ideally, when they're next to each other, they kind of pile up and create a larger vision. But that is done brick by brick, bird by bird, as Annie Lamott says. Many people have experimented with language either in long, uninterrupted, unbroken flows, or in very, very short. Those are all fine, not really for scripts. Scripts, remember, are not primarily something to read. They are important to be a reading experience, but they are also a plan for a production. And as such, they need to be practical. They need to be simple. They need to be easily understood. Hi, Ches. You have not missed it again. There's still some time left. Okay. Michael says, question about decision makers. Barbie was a fun movie, but the story fell flat. I disagree, but fair enough. Was it rewrites or was it rushed into production? Well, see, once again, I just don't agree. So the answer is I can't answer that properly because I don't think it's correct. I don't believe the story fell flat, but whatever it was not rushed into production as far as I've ever heard. They got the script they wanted and they made it. And it was not probably rewrites by other people because everything I heard, Greta Gerwig had her hands on in control of the entire vision. It was her movie. If you don't like what she did, the answer is the decision maker was Greta Gerwig, with support from Mattel and Noah Baumbach and the actors and everybody else. But this is really an auteur film. This is an artistic collaboration guided by one person. That person was Greta Gerwig, and I think she did a magnificent job. Faulkner makes me crazy too. Yeah, Faulkner is one of those people, he's like Cassavetes, he's one of those people who I love that he experimented with an idea, with a technique. I can't actually go with it all the way, but I love having the technique available. I love having it to use as an artist. This is Kitschy did a thesis on Sound and the Fury. And really, Faulkner can be challenging. Many good writers of books are writing to push the limit of your engagement with words. But my point here is this is about screenwriting. In screenwriting, you do not want to do that. You want to be clear. That clarity, by the way, does not mean explaining everything. That is actually unclear. One of the things you want to do in the clarity of screenwriting is pick out a few things and say, like, you don't have to say, he turns on the lights by flipping the light switch up. Okay, we know that, first of all, in space or whatever, we may do a different way. You may turn on the lights by thinking it. The main thing is the issue that you want to have is they turn on the light. And exactly how they do it, you don't want to muddy it with over-describing. You want to think about what the central key thing you're trying to get in, which is we are in a place which is dark and someone makes it light. That's the key. So what you want to do is not under-describe that. You don't want to say he walks into the room and forget to talk about the light. And you also don't want to say he turns on the lights by flipping the light switch up, the light switch by the door upward from its old position or whatever. There is a problem with over-describing, especially in screenplays. You need to really think about what words can I cut and still convey the moment, the action, the vision, the feeling. That is the job. Okay. Question from Jimmy, last name. Hi, Jimmy. Nice to meet you. I don't think I've met you yet. Can a character help set off the dramatic premise but not be much more involved? Yes. I know that can make them feel flat, but do I need to force them back into the screenplay? No. A character can be, there are characters who just show up for one scene or a couple of scenes and then they're gone. They can often have a very large impact even though they actually don't show up that much. But sometimes they're just a character who, as you say, they may set off the situation and then they may leave or become important or die or whatever it is. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. The only thing you want to do is make sure that you're not hinting or promising that they will come back when they won't. You want to make clear that their purpose is served, that they're done. I'm trying to think of some good examples of that. There's got to be some. Offhand, I don't know of any, but I do know that such a thing exists all the time. It is certainly possible. Not every character has to have a continuing story. Some characters just show up for a moment, do their bit, and they're done. There's a character in a movie that isn't great, but I rather like, called The Next 3 Days. It's written and directed by Paul Haggis, who apparently is a terrible person. I've heard this repeatedly from lots of people. On the other hand, he's written some great scripts. The Next 3 Days has a sequence which they featured prominently in the trailer, so you thought this was going to be more important than it actually is, where the main character meets with an experienced thief. Main character is Russell Crowe. The experienced thief is played by Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson has one scene, as far as I remember. It gives him a vital insight into the process of what he's trying to do, and then he leaves. That's it. He's there to help this character figure out his plan. That's all he is. Yeah, this happens a lot. There's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes is at the beginning? Sure. Sometimes it's in the middle? Sure. That character does not need to have an arc. The scene has to have a shape, like winning that person's trust so that they will give the secret, or getting that person's permission so you can do a thing. All of these things are possible. The important thing is to remember that you don't need to then bring that character back if their purpose is served. Okay. We got people trashing Faulkner here. There we go. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to be signing off soon. So just going to leave it open for a minute here in case any of you want to ask a question. But our 3 topics for today so far have been the idea that Act 2, and the main thing again is just think about it as a story. Don't worry about acts. Think of the story as you meet these people, they have a thing that they want or a problem they have to solve, and then you get them going on it. And the more that you get them going by throwing obstacles in their way or making their task hard, the more Act 2 will be fine. This is Kitschy has a little, for those of you who want help with punctuation, there is a book called The Dash of Style, The Art and Mastery of Punctuation. That is recommended by This is Kitschy. I have not read it, but probably a good thing. Okay, Ricky asks, or says, ambiguous endings, both happy and sad, can be very effective, as in the movie Moon. I agree. How to pull that off without making the audience feel cheated? Well, once again, the same question about unhappy endings or ambiguous endings. Inception, for instance, has an ambiguous happy, unhappy ending. And the answer is you do that by establishing that either side of the equation of happiness and unhappiness has validity, has a place in the story. There's a legitimate story of sadness and a legitimate story of happiness, or that that you've got the price of the unhappiness is worth the happiness. Whatever it is, you need to simply not end with something that is unprepared for. You need to make us feel that the choice of ending is an appropriate vision to the story that came before. For instance, if all you're doing in the story is setting up this couple is going to get together and have a happily ever after, and at the end they don't, most people would ask, why? Why did I watch this story if you promised one thing exclusively, as opposed to somebody like in the middle discussing whether there isn't a flaw in the plan of love, or whether there isn't a price to be paid in getting this, or that there's some lesson to be learned from this thing, whether or not it succeeds. There's lots of ways that can work out. The way that audiences feel cheated is if you distinctly head for one thing and then don't deliver it. That's when they feel cheated. Or when you distinctly, when you don't make the ending somehow prepared for by the middle, by the beginning and the middle. You tend to have people feel like if you just tack on a happy ending, people feel cheated. If you've got some story and then all of a sudden at the end somebody just like miraculously changes their character and defies the odds, there's a certain feeling of like, oh, you just did that to give us a happy ending. So a happy ending can feel as bad as an unhappy ending. It can feel as much of a cheat. The point is, whatever happens in the ending should be in some way explored or worked towards in the middle, and then the ending will feel fine. Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, the original from '77, accomplishes purpose and then he's gone. Yes, gone-ish. Yes, in other words, yeah, you can have an unhappy event. In that case, it's not the ending. In other words, he is there to mentor, and then as a mentor must do, as I must do for all of you, at a certain point say, I have now given you my lesson. You need to take it and go on without me. It's no good if all you're doing is turning to me and saying, hey, is this okay? You need to absorb the lesson and make it your own and make your own choices from there. Michael says, when I was a kid, my mom, yes, The Naked Prey. It's a 1950s action adventure movie. Yeah, absolutely. It is quite possible to have large sections of a movie have no dialogue. You are welcome. Okay, Jimmy, last name. What about if they're like the protagonist's mother, where you may expect to hear from them again due to the relationship with their purposes served? That's basically a question of establishing why you wouldn't see them from then on. For instance, if this person doesn't like their mother, if this person, is at the end of this scene, this person, doesn't really want to talk to their mother again, then it would make sense that they would not show up. Or if the mother is simply somebody that they don't see very often, that they're far away, or it would depend on, you need to figure out why we're not showing the mother again. And it could be that they simply talk about the mother for the rest of the time and they're like, I don't need to talk to her. What you need to figure out your solution for that. There isn't a right or wrong. It's not like there's this is the only way to do this. If you've got a scene where you have a protagonist mother who gives some thing that sets off the story, well, what about that relationship means that that's only you know the answer to that. Only you know why they're not seeing them again. I'm sure there are ways. I'm sure there are, but I can only spitball, and there will be hundreds of possibilities, because the answer to any question like this, and this is for all of you, if you have a question, honestly, almost all the time, your answer is in the question. In this question, the answer is, I don't know. You have to know, because why is the mother not involved in that person's life? That's the question that you need to solve. There isn't protagonist mothers always don't show up because of this. That's not how life or stories work. Okay. Question. I have a lot of styles and philosophies I want to squish into one movie. Can I get your thoughts, please? Yes. Everything, everywhere, all at once. You can do it. You have to make that the style of the movie. Also, another movie that I've talked about a lot, that just from the 70s that I liked, called Oh, Lucky Man, which is an episodic story of lots of different styles, literally different filmmaking styles. And they pull it together partly by having actors play multiple parts. There's lots of ways to do it. Once again, the answer is in the question. Truly, this is going to be the biggest lesson I can give all of you. When you have a question, look at it for yourself. And I don't mean this to say I don't want to hear your questions. I mean just no one can answer that except you. You need to think, what am I saying when I say that? And then make a choice from it. For instance, I have a character and I want them to not show up. What in my story makes that likely? If I have a series of different styles and philosophies that I want to cram into one story, what can I do to make my story allow that? The answer could be that one character engages with a lot of different people, or it could be that the story itself is told in different styles. Both are completely legitimate, but only the important thing is that you have a lot of styles and philosophies, and you need to make a choice about how to do that. You are welcome. I like sharing my chops. Are you getting it? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. I'm actually, somebody earlier asked about, am I ready to write? I'm getting to that point where I can go through my outline, and most of the time I'm I roughly know what that scene is about. I can't, at this point, I need to actually write the scene to figure out the rest. How do they walk in, or what do they say? That's writing. I'm getting closer to that point. So I don't know how long it's going to take after that point, but I am getting to that point where I'm no longer I had questions in the outline, how does this person lose contact with that person? Sort of things that you're asking me. And I have to say to myself, okay, how does that happen? Well, and then I have to figure it out from my own situation, which is partly how important is this part, which character is more important, which character wants something in it. That's how you clean up your story till it's ready to write. And then you have to just figure out, how do I say that? And that's the writing part. And with that, I'm going to close it out for today, just keeping it to an hour. It has been delightful to talk to you all. I will see you next week. In the meantime, I will go write something, and you should too.